Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. We are just waiting. We're just checking in. We got a severe weather update here for you over the next several hours. We're talking more still about the possibility of severe weather. So I appreciate you guys joining me here on the 5 on Your Side app. We'll wait for a few more people to join here before we continue to focus on what is happening at this hour and really focus on what's happening in the overnight hours. So one of the first things we're going to pull up here as we wait a few more people join is you can see the severe weather threat, which is still in play for a lot of us, but I really think that it is diminished to some degree. So I always like to double check. I'm checking in on your, I can hear you guys. Cool, that double check that part of it. So let me pull this back up and welcome you to the stream at the moment. So right now, first and foremost, welcome. We're still up to date and trying to keep you posted about what's going on. I've kind of looked at some of the model data from this morning, model data from the midday, and honestly, we're still in pretty good shape. I think the severe threat still exists, but to me, it has diminished to some degree. There are some of us in the region that have a better opportunity for it. But obviously, you can tell that we're in mid-March and it's already almost 80 degrees at lunchtime. So you see this wide area of severe weather. And I'll pull this back up this way. I always try to do a couple of different things. I always try to take advantage of all these things that are going on right now in our little room here before the noon program that I'm on there with Paul. We're just trying to stay awake here. Here, the core of the bottom line is not much has changed from the message, right? The core of the severe weather threat remains to the north. And this is what we're going to look at ahead, is this is where the core of the severe weather threat is, right? You still look at the opportunity, the enhanced risk for severe weather is to the north. And keep in mind, when you look at areas that are under this slight risk for severe weather, which is a good majority of us, we have scattered severe storms, one or two tornadoes with strong winds, not out of the question. Now, to me, that still seems on the high side to some degree, but this is where the enhanced risk is really coming into play. This is where they're going to see multiple tornadoes, large tornadoes, and areas to the north are favored, and that's northern Indiana, and I'll show you that in a second. Just wanted to point out, this is what you're dealing with here. This is not something we are dealing with here. We are not dealing with this in most of our area, right? This is something that is way, way north of us, right? So to me, that's what's important to note right off the get-go. And the first thing that you can expect is the rest of the day is warm and dry, right? And I'll try to look on here and answer your questions if I see any throughout the day. But as we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on our 5 on Your Side app, the storms are going to move in later on tonight. And I really think the timeline for us is not even until 9 o'clock. And I really think that you're going to see a cooler end of the weekend. This is as early as 9 o'clock, and it could carry through 2 o'clock. That's my small window for severe weather. If we're going to get it, that's the way I see it, things right now. Now, we have plenty of energy for a lot of reasons here. Does that scan a little further back for me? We have plenty of energy throughout the area. Let's show you how warm it is right now. I mean, for me, this is what really gets my attention, is the fact that it's incredibly warm. Look at what this clash of this cold air is that's settling in, right? You have temperatures that are in the 50s and 60s, but look at this to the south. I mean, we're in the 70s here. We've got this particular right here is the battleground for severe weather that we're going to see pretty consistently. And even as I pull up just, other temperature map just to show you where we are, I mean, it is very, very warm outside right now from that standpoint. So you're talking about temperatures that are holding steady in the 70s in many locations already. Warm it is in St. Louis, it's 76 degrees, right? So to me, that's what really is. I mean, we're 10 degrees away from a record and it's 11 o'clock, right? So that what is immediately, we have fuel for storms, but the problem is, how do we get there? And we have problems. Let's talk more about this here. And to me, that's what was important for us to talk about, is how can we be in the 70s? We have all this humidity. We have no cloud cover. Why isn't there some big storms? Let's talk a little bit about this, and we can do this a little bit better here on the stream than we're able to in other spots because I got a little more time, and we can talk more about it, and we can show you some of the different cool things that we kind of look at when we're trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And I'll pull back for a second and make myself invisible so you guys can see one of the websites that we typically look at. And I'm going to show you kind of a scan of what's happening today, right? So first and foremost, you can see the scan of what is happening today is, as I look at this website, these are just some of the models that we use. But I want to pull up, and this is at about 7 o'clock, and I'm going to pull up, you can see where my little scan is here. Before I make this a little bit bigger, I'm going to scan this closer to the St. Louis area, right? So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to pull up a forecast sounding before I make this a little bit bigger so that we can see things a little bit bigger. And then I try to make sense of what this is, right? So first and foremost, we have a lot of ingredients that are in play. And as we look at just first and foremost, a couple of different things. One being this warm air that we have at the surface, right? That's the first thing. But one thing that we so often see at times is when you go up with height, it gets colder, right? It's warmer at the surface. When you go up with height, it gets colder. We've flown on airplanes, we've seen mountains, right? We've discussed this. But sometimes there are little nudges of warm air. And in the wintertime, we have talked about this nudge of warm air being important. Well, it's also important in the springtime and summertime too, because it inhibits thunderstorm development. And you'll see where it gets colder here. There's cold air up there. And you're talking about 35,000+ feet, then it starts to go the other direction. But that's where it is cold. But also, this warm air here, if this is warm right here, you're going to see thunderstorms that can still be possible, but they're going to be higher. This is where the storm development could be. If you're going to see a tornado, you're going to see larger hail in some regard. It's going to get much further. It's going to get much further here. That is warm air that inhibits thunderstorm development and really inhibits their potential from growing at a higher. So let's pause there, and I'm going to back out of this a little bit. And now I'm going to show you something that's a little closer to where I think is going to be the better spot for storm development. And we'll show you this. Let me get myself out of there. Get myself out of here real quick. Now let's zoom out, reset, get this back. We always like to do this on the fly. Like I said, we always like to get things going on the fly here in terms of a little reset so that you can see exactly what's going on, because I want to give you an idea of, it did not reset that part of it, which is why it was hard to see. Now let's scan this, which we can do here. Let's scan this a little closer to where the actual front is. Let's just pick Chicago, for example, or around Chicago, right? I'm going to click this. You won't quite see that warm layer of air, and it goes much lower. And I think that's what's really important here, because you'll see that that is where we have the opportunity. And then also look at how it goes directly up after this. And that's what I'm going to zoom out for you here as we pull this back out just a little bit here. Now look at the difference here. And I can pull up a difference in a sounding at a point. But notice how at this point, this is a little bit different here from a time perspective. I forgot to flash myself back on, and we will do that, right? So notice how cold air is immediately realized. You have a lot of this wind, which is one of the big factors for what's going on. But notice you have this warm air that is much closer to the surface, and then it immediately gets colder. So when we see that, when we have warm air that's up here and it's up here, you're not going to see the tornado development like that. A lot of these storms are elevated. Notice how it's much closer to the surface. We would consider 1,900, somewhere around the surface, right? So that's where we're going to compare it. So immediately, we can be as warm and as humid and have all the ingredients, but if they're not able to be realized without the potential for a lot of other things, it's going to be difficult for us to see any sort of development. And that's kind of where we are right now. And I pull this back out, and I'll show you where we are along this front as I switch to a different use of the computer here. And it always logs me out because that's what always happens. So it'll take me a pop to get over there. But what we do see as I flash back on just a minute, what you notice at this point is where the highest threat for severe weather is. This is what's going on. We have this cold front, which will be looming. This is here. We see the cold front already. We have this surface low, and then we have this warm air mass, which we're on this side of, right? All that is feeding into this part of it, and that's where we're seeing that at least colder air aloft is a little closer, that warm air, and then also a lot more of that wind shear and twisting of the wind. And that's where we're seeing those thunderstorms kind of develop along this, move along that direction, and then they reach that twisting, and that's where we're hitting, right? That's where you're going to see on radar in a second as I show you your future cast in a second. The development will be here. We have upper level wind, which is carrying all this stuff in this direction, and that's where the development for severe weather is more likely in terms of the worst of it. And we're talking about tornadoes and even large tornadoes right about here. Now I'll show you this with all that information being in mind, with the fact that that's why I don't think that we're going to fully reach potential for all of that. Let's show you where the severe weather potential is at the moment as we talk about what's happening here. And this is where we are in terms of our enhanced risk for severe weather. You'll see that it's really from far northern Missouri here, northeast Missouri, and all the way into, really, I would say, central Illinois, northern Indiana. That's where the core of the severe weather development is expected to be. Now, when you look at it from a at least piece by piece perspective, you're talking about, I would expect, this is where the wind threat is, right? This is kind of a broad wind threat, which I think is in central Texas here. But when you're talking about exactly what's going on, this is why I think we have a low end threat for a lot of this. Look at our hail risk. It's on a second day. Let's go to this day specifically. This is where large hail is expected to be. And really, from a standpoint of it, it's going to be frontal boundary along where it's a little bit colder and we see those supercell standalone thunderstorms develop. This is where we're seeing at least that tornado risk. And to me, this is where I would expect is going to be the worst of it. In fact, there is a new product which is not in this system, which really has highlighted areas north in that enhanced risk for some larger tornadoes. Be familiar with at least this. They've kind of changed the products, the messaging, and it hasn't fully gone into my system yet. But notice that if you're worried about a tornado, if you're in the St. Louis area, you're in most of these areas, very low threat anyway. Really, the only spots that are drug into this is really Pike County, northern Lincoln County. You have a very minor threat in a brief time. To me, if you're watching right now and you're wondering, do I have a threat for significant tornadoes or tornadoes in general? I really think the answer is very, very little to none. It's not out of the question briefly. This is where you're going to see the core of a tornado threat. You will see that everywhere tonight. Social media will have updates in the morning. That's where you're likely to see the core of the tornado and northern Indiana. Now, here's what I think the radar may look like as we try to find some of the most recent future products here that give us a best idea of what this may occur. Because I think you're going to see, and I'll pull this back out from a broad perspective, and I think you can really see it on this one, because watch how these storms develop along what I just showed you where this front is. Notice how they're in Chicago 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, right? For us, it's in the mid 80s, but notice how we have that warm air over the top of us. That has inhibited storm development, and even as we get closer to sunset, with the peak heating of the day starting to wind down, sometimes that also fades in the morning. We see that those storms develop. That's not the case, right? We're watching storms develop now along the line of where that cold front is and also where that warm front is. So these are the storms that are going to affect us later on, not the stronger ones, which are likely to spin near Chicago and that warm front. And as we put this into motion and I zoom in, watch how it becomes much less impressive over time. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, we see more of those storms typically start to fade. To me, that's where I think we are with this, right? I think we're going to see a lot of these storms start to fade. I still want us to be prepared in case, but it's a 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. window. I think that's where we are. If we don't see anything pop before midnight, I'm not saying, hey, go to sleep and be worried about tornadoes. You might see 1 or 2 severe thunderstorm warnings. That's the way I see it right now. So that's my biggest. And for us, it is a low-end threat for a lot of this stuff. But I want you to be prepared for the potential, especially the northern areas, as we fade into the evening. So with that being said, let's check to see if, I would say, let's see if we've got any questions on the chat. I always like to double check to make sure that if there's any questions, you guys, I think I try to answer most of them. Richard said it's just a little in the year for this type of weather, and I would say, yeah, for 84 degrees it is. We obviously were very, very active last year at this time of the year. We're going to see a nice break. I'll flash the 7-day on before I end this because I think you guys are looking forward to getting a little bit of a break. I will say it's going to be chilly next week, as you would expect, right? That's makes a lot of sense. But yes, we're going to get a little bit better here for next week, and that's where I think we are with this right now. We'll get through with temperatures falling in the morning, but I do think things are going to get better, and we'll talk more about that throughout the entirety. But like I said, I'll leave this up for you. We are at least trending in the right direction in terms of severe weather, but we'll keep you posted all day long.